The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, Chapter 19, The Trips Festival. In this chapter of the book, interactions between the pranksters and the police grow more heated. Casey and the pranksters have always had a tenuous relationship with authority figures, and they saw the police and law officials as being part of their game. However, they have often relied on the police and on lawyers to protect them when things get out of hand. It becomes apparent in this chapter that the pranksters have broken too many laws which have landed them in a more serious situation. As the acid tests continue to take place and make Richard Alpert nervous, Stewart Brand thinks of a way to incorporate a multimedia celebration to simulate an LSD experience without LSD. The Trips Festival, which was billed as a big celebration, was going to use light effects and music mainly. It was going to be called the Acid Test, featuring Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters. Kesey had recently put on his biggest acid test at the Fillmore Auditorium in San Francisco. Everyone dropped acid around 5 or 6 p.m. to prep themselves. Inevitably, cops showed up around 2 a.m. to bust the event, which brings in Kesey's lawyers from his marijuana charges that he's so notoriously famous for. Police try to say that Kesey dealt drugs to minors, and his lawyers try to prove that the raid was unwarranted. Kesey makes a deal with the judge to get 3 years probation and 6 months on a work team at a farm. A few days before the Trips Festival, Kesey and Mountain Girl go to Stewart Brand's apartment to make plans. They sit out on the roof of Brand's building and talk about the setup. They throw small pebbles off the top of the roof and into the alley below. One of the residents calls the cops, claiming drunks are throwing rocks at her windows. The cops arrive, which leads to the quote by Kesey, "Do I learn anything? Or once again loaded and disbelieving as 2 cops climb 5 stories to drag me to the cooler." When the cops arrive, they say they see Kesey throw a small bag of brownish material onto the roof of another building. Kesey begins to wrestle one of the cops. The bag the cops find contains marijuana, and this begins the majority of Kesey's legal troubles. The Trips Festival must go on, however. Kesey is not supposed to hang out with the pranksters anymore or even go to the Trips Festival. But Kesey's arrest brought much media attention to the festival. The night of the festival, a huge mass of heads show up, already high on acid. The pranksters have built an enormous building in the center of the hall they rented out and have covered it with electronic equipment. Kesey dresses up in a spaceman suit and has a projector that he uses to project things onto the wall. There are 2 bands playing, one of which is the Grateful Dead, and a huge acid party ensues. One of the pranksters, Norman, takes so much acid that he begins to imagine that he is God and that he can control and move the crowd on his command. After 3 nights, the festival influenced the public. Weekend trip festivals begin happening at the Fillmore on a weekly basis, and for the first time, people loaded can come out in public while being loaded. All the while, the media outlets still believe that this is an acid experience without the acid. According to Wolf, the Haight-Ashbury era began that weekend. The festival's success does not make Kesey impervious to his charges. A judge makes him sell his house and leave San Mateo County. He goes to stay at Babs' home in Los Angeles. Another warrant is put out for his arrest, this time for having violated his parole at the Trips Festival. Since parole violation carries a mandatory prison sentence, Kesey decides he is going to run away to Mexico and become an outlaw. One of the pranksters will sneak him in over the border at night. They also devise to fake Kesey's suicide by having one of the pranksters slam his truck into a tree by a cliff and leaving a suicide note in the truck saying that he jumped off the cliff into the ocean. Kesey and the pranksters get high and compose a long, maniacal suicide note, and Kesey leaves for Mexico. According to the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test Study Guide, Summary and Analysis, the Trips Festival is an all-out acid bonanza that somehow manages to pull wool over the eyes of the media and the authorities. Again, Wolf's new journalism style tries to get inside the heads of the participants in the festival. He is not just reporting on who was there, what they were doing, and what happened, but is instead trying to get into their minds. This is best expressed through Wolf's description of Norman's God delusions. Through Wolf's jerky, strange prose, the reader is transported into the minds of the pranksters.